Okay, good evening. Thank you all for coming this evening. I really appreciate you coming out here to learn some interesting ideas and hear some wonderful stories and not so wonderful stories. Ted Schaefer, First Selectman of Burlington, who is right here, and I thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you also to the organizations who are not on our panel but are represented, the Bristol Burlington Health Department, Wheeler Clinic, New Britain Meriden Clinical Services, and thank you also to the McCall Center for refreshments and to Alan Beitman and his technical staff at Lewis Mills, because without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. Welcome also to Mike Chris. I thought I saw him come in. There he is. First Selectman of the town of Harwinton, and I don't see Jonathan. Is he? Yeah, not here. Okay. Unfortunately, Tom Ferry could not be here this evening due to a death in the family. He does send his regrets, as he knows this is an important event for the town. I am the chair of the Burlington Community Fund, and I will be your moderator this evening. I hope you have your 3x5 cards. We will be asking you to jot down questions as we go along this evening, and during the intermission period, we will collect them, and then we will ask the panel members. I will introduce the panel members after we have a short video presentation by the McCall Center about this problem that we have, not just in this town, but everywhere. Okay, we set? Oh, Sarah, you're gonna, okay. I'd like to introduce Sarah Osborne of the McCall Center, who will explain more about this video presentation.
Yep, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a short overview video, about 2 minutes, and then I'm going to talk briefly about how this crisis has impacted this community.
The opioid epidemic. It's the deadliest drug crisis in American history, killing about 90 Americans every day, roughly the same number as car crashes. Here's short answers to some key questions about the crisis. What exactly is an opioid? Opioids are a class of drugs that interact with opioid receptors on nerve cells in the body and brain. They regulate pain and affect the brain's reward or pleasure system, which can make people feel high. That makes opioids powerful painkillers, but also extremely addictive. So what is the crisis about? The current crisis started in the 1990s with the overprescription of opioid painkillers like Oxycontin. Over the next decade, a growing number of people became dependent on these drugs. And for many, what started with pills grew into a heroin addiction. Then in 2014, potent synthetic opioids like fentanyl began entering the drug supply in large amounts. Where's the crisis most severe? It's worse in the Midwest, Appalachia, and New England, but it really is a national problem. Synthetic opioids are continuing to enter new markets, especially in the Northeast and the South. Why has it gotten so much worse in recent years? Decades of opioid overprescription, an influx of cheap heroin, and the emergence of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is 50 times more potent than heroin. Shouldn't we just stop prescribing opioids? Not necessarily. Opioids have improved the quality of life for millions of people, particularly cancer patients and those with acute pain. And suddenly removing access to opioids from those who are dependent on them to function could easily push people to more dangerous opioids, like heroin or counterfeit pills. So what can be done? There are many variables, but any solution would require controlling the distribution of prescription opioids, expanding access to medication-assisted treatment, and making naloxone, an overdose antidote, more accessible. In addition, more controversial ideas like drug checking services or supervised injection sites may be necessary to slow the rise in overdose deaths.
Okay, so something that is important to understand when talking about the opioid crisis is what constitutes for an opioid use disorder. So what is up there is the DSM criteria, which is the diagnostic manual that therapists and counselors and psychiatrists use to diagnose individuals. And so 2 to 3 of those items, if someone is suffering from that, would be a mild disorder. 4 to 5 would be a moderate disorder, and then 6 or more would be a severe disorder. Specifically in our area, the opioid crisis has had a much more significant impact than maybe some other areas of the state and some areas of the country. If you look at this data, the state of Connecticut from 2012 to 2016 has seen a 32% increase in overall admissions for treatment for the primary substance of opioids. And so then the average number of admissions is 1.7. So if you look down below that, specifically in Northwest Connecticut, the number of admissions has grown 110%. And when you see that number of unduplicated clients, that means the number of people who, it controls for people who seek treatment multiple times. So an unduplicated client, it's somebody being reported just once, no matter how many times they've entered treatment. So what's different about rural communities? There's a lack of treatment capacity and facilities, and even the highly skilled facilities that are in these areas, it's hard to get to them as far as public transportation. Physicians with little or no training around substance abuse. These same physicians sometimes do not have access to the prescription monitoring systems that can help control for people who doctor shop or seek out painkillers through multiple doctors. There's economic and environmental factors. There's also the big issue with insufficient law enforcement. If you look at the comparison of Torrington, which is a larger community, there are 76 officers, it's only 40 square miles, 35,000 residents. If you look at Troop B or Troop L, they cover 13 towns for Troop B, 514 square miles, 78,000 residents. So there just isn't the capacity of law enforcement to have that watchful eye. Where do people get access? There's a misconception sometimes that a lot of people are getting opioids, whether it's prescription pills or heroin, on their own. What we found is that most individuals, for the first time that they have gotten access to an opioid, is from somebody that they know. So they've gotten it from a friend or a relative. So that's when we talk about storing your pills safely and knowing how to get rid of your prescriptions when you don't need them anymore, why that is so important. Because while we might expect it to be a drug dealer or a stranger, the most common place that people are getting their opioids are from a friend or a relative. So who's affected nationally? It's poor white men from rural communities, but when we look specifically at Connecticut, it's white males in suburban areas. The greatest number of deaths are between the ages of 22 and 32, and then there's another hike between 40 and 50. So the typical drug abuser in Litchfield County, or in this northwest corner, you can expand it to that, the age is 25 to 54, and it's a white male. The largest concentration of arrests for related crimes occur with individuals who are 25 to 34. So what can we do? The video touched on it a little bit. One of the things that is talked about most in the recovery community today is medically assisted treatment, where an individual will take Suboxone or another medication that will help with their recovery. What medically assisted treatment does is it buys the person time to actually deal with the addiction and deal with the root causes of their addiction while they're stabilized. It is recommended that they eventually taper off the medication if possible, but for some individuals, this medication is something that they may need for their lifetime to abstain from substances, which is fine. So what can we do? We talk about prevention. So the age of first use for any substance, especially opioids, is 12 or 13 years old, and it's not necessarily opioid users. The typical opioid users start with either marijuana or alcohol at ages 12 or 13 and eventually progresses to other substances. So we can use prevention programs and strategies. Another big thing is access, having safe storage of those prescription medications and knowing where your drop boxes are. And then so one of the final things, this is something that I share also with my middle school and high school students when I do presentations with them. What this graph demonstrates is that the earlier you start introducing substances into your body or you start experimenting, the greater your risk is for developing a dependence on it. So this is specific to alcoholism, but it could be related to any substance, and it can be related to opioids. Somebody who experiments or starts introducing substances into their system at 13 has over a 45% chance of developing an addiction to it, compared to an individual at 21 where their brain is more developed and they're more mature, has less than a 10% chance of developing an addiction. There is still a risk of developing addiction. The only way to avoid that risk is to never introduce substances into your body. And these are just a couple of quotes from parents. There are additional resources out on our table from McCall. When your kid's dying from a brain tumor or leukemia, the whole community shows up. They bring casseroles, they pray for you, and they send you cards. When your kid's on heroin, you don't hear from anybody until they die. Then everybody comes and they don't know what to say. And then we see recovery every day, but if we can prevent addiction, all of the heartache and pain and suffering that could be alleviated, that would never start. Who wouldn't want that?
Let me introduce to you the people that we have. To my left, we have Alico on the panel, and she is someone in long-term recovery. Next, we have Kevin Gerasi, and he's a police officer from South Windsor involved in narcotics there. Next, we have Lauren Johnson. She's a licensed professional counselor and co-owner of Catalyst Counseling of Connecticut, which is located in Burlington. And she's been working in the addiction field for the last 11 years and specializes in treating those with substance use disorders, including opioid use disorder. Offenders with reentry issues, anxiety disorders, with a particular aptitude for working with those experiencing relationship issues. Okay, next we have Tom Bennett, and Tom is a sergeant with the state police, Troop L.
From the drug unit.
From the drug unit. Okay, just the drug unit in this area. Next we have Dino, and Dino is a Burlington resident and a parent of a Region 10 student. He's the director of residential treatment at McCall Center, and he's good with keeping it short and sweet. Next we have Reverend Wendell Taylor. Reverend Taylor is the pastor at the Congregational Church here in Burlington for 16 years. He's from Washington, D.C., was educated with an MD at BU in Boston, and has counseled people with addictions to alcohol and drugs for decades. He also has raised 3 children in the Burlington school system, and he has seen drugs adversely affect the lives of many of its students. Then we have John Haviland. John is the chief of the Burlington Volunteer Fire Department, which provides advanced life support ambulance services to the town of Burlington. He's a lifelong resident of the greater Hartford area, and his wife Sue and he are the proud parents of a 15-year-old son who attends Lewis Mills High School and is very committed to working with all of you to end this opioid crisis. And then we have Karen. Karen Zaorski is a former social worker for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And her son, as a result of her son Raymond's death at age 26 from a cocaine overdose, she now devotes her time and energy to advocacy, education, legislative change, and support for individuals and families who have been affected by substance use disorder. She volunteers as an administrator and moderator for an online bereavement support group for loss to substance-related causes, which is sponsored by the Compassionate Friends. She's been an active member of Wolcott Crossroads, which is an all-volunteer, not-for-profit community organization that focuses on education, prevention, intervention, support groups, alcohol and drug-free activities for the Wolcott area. There's some information about it out in the hallway that you can see during the break. She also sits on the State Drug and Alcohol Policy Council Subcommittee for Treatment and Recovery. We have quite a great deal of experience in front of us. So the first question we can ask is, and you can go in any order you want to, just jump right in there. You know, I know we're all lined up like we're in a lineup of some kind, but you know, what do you see as your role in addressing the epidemic? And Karen, you want to go first, only because you've done so much of this. And we do have microphones here, if you'd like to grab one.
Do I need one? People hear me?
Probably need one.
Yeah, and we can move it around.
Hi.
You can go too.
Well, I come to the problem through the back door, unfortunately. But as a result of our son's death, I have come to attempt to help other individuals and families so that they don't have to go through what our family has suffered through. Ray started using drugs and alcohol at age 15. He smoked cigarettes, he drank alcohol, and smoked marijuana. He did not see that there was any issue with what he was doing because everyone does it. At that time, I didn't believe that everyone did it. However, there was a significant percentage of his peers in our small community of Wolcott who were also engaging in the same risk-taking behaviors at younger ages. Also, I might add that my son started these activities at age 15, whereas now the common age really is more in the middle school. And so you're looking at 12-year-olds who are experimenting, and that is even more frightening. What we did in Wolcott as a result of my son Raymond's death and the death of 2 other young people at that time, which was 2010, we decided to create an organization in the community that would try to uncover what the culture was. And we knew if we were going to do that, we had to speak to those who were using the drugs. And so what we found was it was a lot easier for young people to have honest conversations with some adults that weren't connected to them in any way. And so from the get-go, we knew that what we needed to do was ask questions and do a lot of listening and refrain from commenting and refrain from trying to solve problems. And so after a couple of years of doing that, we decided to create an education program in our school system. It wasn't easy to get it into the school system, but once we got it there, we were able to be a part of a curriculum in the health class. And so every student who came to this came instead of going to health or to gym, so that they cycle throughout the year. Again, we provided some information and we did a lot of listening. From that, we decided to offer some support groups for young people, and so we created a 12-step AA group for young people, and we created a 12-step NA group for young people, and that takes place weekly. And then the following year, as we developed more relationships with the families of the children who were coming, we started a parent support group. And those are just a few of the things that we've done in our community. We also prepare to offer the community drug and alcohol-free social activities. One of our most popular is a open mic night. Come Friday night to Wolcott, 6 o'clock at the Walk Center. Bring your talents or come and listen to someone else's talents. I don't want to take up too much time. Those are just a few of the things that we did in our community.
That you're doing. Okay.
Unfortunately, the fire department's role in the opioid crisis is mostly reactive. We're responding to life-threatening emergencies with these overdoses. We wish there was more we could do to be reactive and work on the prevention side. And hopefully this evening we'll find out more about how we can help you all with that.
I think one of the major responsibilities that the leaders of this community have are to communicate to the people that live in this town specifically that drug and alcohol issues are reality in our town. Since I've lived here for 16 years, I think there's a tendency for people to deny that any such thing like drug addiction or overdose deaths or can possibly exist in Burlington. God, not in Burlington, you know, not in our pristine town. So I've done too many funerals over the years of people who have died from addictions. Every Sunday in our church we pray for people. People bring up issues every Sunday. The people they know who are addicted. Many of our parishioners have children that, not many, but some that are addicted to heroin and other issues. So these things are very real, and it distresses me some. I commend you've come. I think it's wonderful that you've come. It distresses me, though, to see all these empty seats, which indicates to me that a lot of people don't want to deal with these issues, and I wish they did, because we'd be much better off if we did. So one of the things we're doing in our church is we have 4 12-step meetings now for people with drug and alcohol addictions, 12-step program meetings, and I think that's a great thing. So, but the main thing is just to increase awareness in our town. I think that's a big first step. So thank you for having this panel and for doing that tonight.
So for over 9 years, I've been involved directly in the treatment of drug and alcohol addiction, first as a substance certified counselor, as a licensed therapist, and now as the director of an intensive residential treatment program. So we deal at McCall, we have lots of different modalities there. The prevention department is great because they're the ones that get the words out to the people who are maybe most likely to eventually pick up. You know, they go to the families with probabilities of using, and that's fantastic. The reason I came here tonight is just because I've seen such a change in the last 9 years with drug addiction and who it affects. And I'm a new Burlington resident. I have a child who's over in the kindergarten in Lake Garda. And I've seen in communities like this that too often they think they're insulated from such things. And you might be more insulated in some areas, but you're not totally cut off, you know? The people that I serve, the people in my treatment center, are predominantly people from areas like these. You look around and it's your children who are in my treatment center. So what I've been doing a lot lately is making a real push. Now these individuals are already in treatment, but really making a push on family involvement in treatment and just trying to educate the family members about the disease, about how it happens, about the warning signs, because there's a lot of warning signs. I think too often people see them but don't want to see them because it's scary, right? It's easier to be in denial. Denial is not just about a reaction to people who are actually using. It's oftentimes a reaction from the loved ones around them too. So as far as educating the families, at my treatment center, we do MAT options such as Suboxone, naltrexone, methadone. We have a licensed pharmacist on staff so that every single individual who wants to leave my facility with a Narcan prescription that's for overdoses can leave with it. And I strongly advise all clients, even if they're don't do opiates, to leave with it because you never know. You know, because it really is an epidemic. 64,000 people, I think, last year, about that, died from opiate addiction and overdose deaths. So it is absolutely an epidemic. It's not hyperbole by saying that. It's not over-exaggeration. It's an epidemic. And, you know, educating yourself and forming great relationships with your children where they can be honest to you, where keep them socially involved in activities. You know, addiction is a disease of isolation, is what it is. So the more involved in your child's life, the more involved they are in their community, the less likelihood that they're going to pick up. It's not going to guarantee it, but it definitely lowers the chances. So That's all I got now. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm the law enforcement aspect of the panel here, and sometimes it's tough to sit up here with a lot of people who everybody perceives as the ones that are helping on the back end. And let's face it, nowadays, a lot of people don't like to see law enforcement police officers when we show up at your house. And I try to tell everybody when I sit on these panels that law enforcement isn't always the enemy in these cases here. And a lot of times that we go to people's houses, we're there on a search warrant for drugs. And in the outerlying communities like these here, we end up sometimes at people's houses where their kids are the ones that are using and or selling drugs in the community. And it's a hard thing for the parent to see the police coming into the house, and now we're going through everybody's personal possessions in the house. That's not good for a lot of people. And for us, I try to tell people, listen, we are police officers, we're law enforcement, we do have a job to do. And unfortunately, sometimes it's not the most pleasant thing for us to have to come into somebody's house and put the handcuffs on their child. And when I'm talking kids, I'm talking 20, 21-year-old kids now. I'm not talking 14, 15-year-old kids. And what happens in a lot of these cases is that a lot of the kids are selling out of the parents' house, and they don't even realize it. And now we're there, not because we want to be there, but because we have to be there. So I say, listen, I'm a human being just like everybody else. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a family person, I got a lot of family. And I say, please listen, you got to look beyond this at this point. Don't be angry with us, law enforcement, that's in your house at this point. Step back for a second and realize why we're here. Because at that point, it really shouldn't be about us being in your house. It should be about your child, the person who brought you into your house. They need help at that point. And a lot of people don't understand that coming from law enforcement because that's not our typical role, but that's really what we're there to do. So I try to have those talks with those parents that, hey, listen, the lawyer, don't think about him right away. Think about that person that's going to get your kid, your family member, whether it's your wife or your husband or a brother or whoever's living in the house with you at that point. That's the most important thing with the opiates. You got to get people help before it gets too late at that point. And we're stepping beyond our typical law enforcement role at this point, and I can tell you that one of the programs that the state police has going now is out on the eastern half of the state. What we're doing is we're doing early intervention. We've partnered up with Department of Mental Health with the state of Connecticut, and what we do now is when we have that first interaction with somebody that has an opiate issue going on, we have a mental health person there that steps in right away and kind of works with law enforcement to help that person that has that issue. Now, let's get you the help you need, and we'll deal with the rest of the stuff that comes along with that later on down the road. So that's kind of just to give you an overview of what law enforcement is doing and where we're evolving with this opiate issue that's going on nowadays, that we're just not typically there to put the handcuffs on somebody. We're there, we have a bigger role than that nowadays. So thank you.
As a therapist in the community, my role is really to provide individualized counseling services for those that suffer from opiate use disorders or other substance use disorders. We generally see people after they've gone through a detox or inpatient, and we're kind of a step-down level of care to work with them as they're integrating back into the community, to work on the triggers while they're going home, going back to work, and dealing with other family stressors. We also work with a lot of individuals to get them into the medication-assisted treatments, whether it's methadone, Suboxone, Vivitrol, to make sure they're in the right level of care. We work really hard with the families of those that are addicted as well. The family unit is a huge support network for the individual with the substance use disorders, and we like bringing them in to talk about how they can help to support this person in their recovery, and also to see some of those signs and be able to help them if they see a lapse or a relapse coming. So we get very involved with the family unit as well.
I have one.
Okay.
So I'm a police officer in the town of South Windsor. I know that's anywhere near around here. But my background was I was part of a narcotics task force. I am now currently a certified drug recognition expert, so I'm able to go out and do a lot of these presentations. My primary Training is behind actual physiological effects of drugs. So when an officer has an individual on the side of the road that they suspect is impaired, they call one of us in and we're able to do an evaluation to determine what types of drugs they're on. So I've gotten to travel throughout the country and see everybody's drug problems basically. But our role as police officers has absolutely changed, both for our own safety as well as for the public. They've changed the laws around. So if an individual is in possession of personal use heroin, cocaine, any of those type of things, it's not a felony anymore. It's a Class A misdemeanor. So we don't have to bring them to jail. We can write them a summons. And in my area, the Manchester South Windsor area, we have a HOPE program. It's mirrored off of the ANGELS program in Massachusetts. And what it is if the person's willing to accept treatment, instead of arresting them, we'll take their drugs, whatever, if it's a minor crime that we can work with them on, and we'll transport them right to the hospital, where they're able to go inpatient treatment right then and there. So if the patient's willing to accept treatment, instead of incarceration, we're trying to find them other methods in which they can get the help that they need. Law enforcement-wise, and Sarge could probably echo it, is we're getting exposed to these drugs out there ourselves. The days of us going in there and searching cars to get contraband, we have to be careful what we're touching, what we're breathing. The Hartford Police Department did a search warrant on a house, and they were using a distraction device that ended up kicking up a whole bunch of heroin and fentanyl in the air, and the officers got exposed to it. We've had officers that had to get Narcan on calls because they were exposed to it. So we've had to redesign our policies and procedures on how we handle evidence, including we have Narcan in our evidence processing room, so that if one of our officers becomes exposed to it, we can administer it to ourselves. In South Windsor, we are first responders for medical emergencies, so we carry naloxone in our cruisers. So that was another set of training our officers had to go through. That was equipment that we had to procure. And it's additional uptake on training as well as restocking the stuff when we're using them out in the streets. Because we're getting there before the ambulance, we're getting there before the fire department. So we're the ones that are actually breathing into these people when we find them unresponsive, administering the naloxone, and in some cases, and I'm sure the Sarge can echo it, they're fighting with us because we ruined their high. We reversed their high that they paid for, and now they're angry at us for bringing them back to life. And unfortunately, we're doing it to the same people regularly. You know, we Narcan somebody that we saw last week that we Narcaned because they know it's out there. They're not worried about what happens to them because we're going to come and help them. But we also have the other side to that is when we're finding these people deceased. Now, we have to process the scene. We have to notify family. So it's certainly changed the way that we're doing law enforcement, both for ourselves as well as how we're treating the community as well. And how many times have you heard about these panels before this, where all these people would get together for the town and discuss problems that we're having? Now they're everywhere. I've done about a half a dozen of these in the last 6 months.
Hi, as a recovering addict, I can come from the other side to let you know that there's too many people stereotyping what an addict is. You know, you don't want to admit that it may be your husband or your wife, your child, your grandmother. You know, it's out there, it's affecting everybody. And a lot of addicts do not want to admit that they are. That's the first step, is admitting you are. Or do not want, you know, a lot of people won't sit up here where I am because of embarrassment. We can't be that way anymore. Everybody is responsible. In the community, you need to acknowledge, you need to help your family. Don't be embarrassed by it. You know, it's a disease. And it needs to be treated as a disease, not as, you know, the junkie on the corner. That's not where it's at anymore, you know. Everybody's responsible because we all know an addict, whether you know it, you know, admit it or not. We all know addicts. And so as a community, we have not give them everything, you know. You have to admit it yourself that you're an addict. No one can do that for you. You can try and make your family member admit it. It's not going to work. But be supportive, you know. Let them know the love is there. And look at your children. Look at your husband. Look at your wife. You know, them pain pills. Yeah, okay, so they're a prescription. Well, guess what? When it says take one every 6 hours, and you're taking 3 every 2 hours, there's a problem. And when your kid sees them in your cabinet and decides to crush it up and snort it, there's a problem. When you go and get it upped because you're not getting the relief you want, and your kid is not reading that prescription, and he's now taking 90 milligrams instead of 30, there's a problem. And we're all responsible.
Pass that back. I know that I gave you questions beforehand, but I'm going to just tweak them a little bit here because we've talked about a couple of these. Obviously, we do have abuse in this community as there's abuse in every community. I think part of the problem is that you mentioned this, the warning signs. Perhaps maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the warning signs. I don't know if we know that. How do we know that people are on drugs? We'll come to the stigma in a little bit. What are some of the warning signs that we can look for?
Well, for instance, if you're talking about the physiological effects, you're going to start noticing weight loss, hair loss, constricted pupils. Narcotics are the only substance, illicit substance, that will cause constricted pupils, pinpoint pupils. If you go in your kid's room and it's at nighttime and you look at them with a little bit of light and those pupils are tiny as can be, something's wrong. Something needs to be addressed as well. Start looking for the money. Where's the money going? Are they asking for money a lot? I could tell you the kids do have pill parties. They meet up together on a weekend and everybody drops a pill in a candy jar and people try them. They're absolutely using it. They're absolutely doing it. Check your prescription cabinets. If you have a grandparent or an elderly parent at the house, check their prescriptions because they're abusing those as well. Start noticing differences. I know we all live in this digital world where we're all consumed too with our Facebook and our Instagram and a lot of the other stuff where we tend not to pay attention to some of the smaller details. But is your kid all of a sudden starting to get a little distant? Do they not talk as much? Are they hiding up in their room a lot? Go through their room and look around. You're the parent. You don't need a search warrant to go in your kid's room. Go in there. Ask them. Take a look at their social media accounts. But we miss these small little changes like, hey, he hasn't really been eating dinner a lot, or she hasn't really been coming around and talking to us. And they're asking for a lot of money. You know, at least those are the type of things that we're looking for. We're looking for the constricted pupils. We're looking for, are they tired and lethargic all the time? Nausea, vomiting. One of the things that they're abusing out there is anti-diarrhea medication. They call it poor man's methadone. Are you noticing some of that stuff happening? You know, but you're not going to notice it if we're not paying attention. Sorry.
My role's a little bit different than the recognition part of it. And what I try to tell parents sometimes when we go there and we're doing surveillance on a house, we're watching, one of the things that always amazes me is within a half hour, we'll see 6 different people go into a house and they're back out of there in less than a minute. Or somebody in that house, you'll see them come out, they'll go meet somebody in the driveway, they're there for 30 seconds and they're back in the house again. And when you talk to the occupants of the house and you say, hey, listen, didn't you ever see this activity going on here? Was it ever suspicious to you? And a lot of people, it always amazes me that it's kind of, people think that's the norm. It's really not the norm. You know, nobody's friends come to the house and visit for less than 30 seconds in their auditor, especially, you know, kids that have 6 or 7 visitors coming a night. And again, I always use kids because, you know, I'm getting up there in age now. So, you know, a 21, 25-year-old person is young to me now. And I noticed that kids are staying home a lot more to, you know, that 25-year-old stage. So I always tell people, kind of be aware of that. You know, see what's going on. Find out why their friends don't come in, why they're going to meet 3 friends in the driveway, and then they leave immediately afterwards instead of coming in and having a social conversation with you in the house. You know, that was a big thing in my house. My mom wanted to meet everybody. You weren't getting in that house unless you had a 10-minute conversation with her, you know, and I look back and I say, thank God that, you know, somebody was there doing that to me back then, so.
So as far as physiological, officer hit those really well. The only other one I think of is nodding off. It looks like someone is trying to fight staying asleep when they're going down and going up and going down and going up. A really good sign as far as personality change in children. If you have a child that's outgoing, has lots of interests, and all of a sudden dramatically they're losing interest in a lot of their healthy interests, there's just a sign something's going wrong. If they drastically switch circles of friends, if they've had healthy friends, if they've been involved in sports, they've been involved in activities, and all of a sudden they don't want to do that, and they're hanging out with a totally different social circle. If they're open to you, talk to you a lot, and all of a sudden that's something that they don't want to do often. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of this sounds like puberty, but I mean, we're talking about an exaggerated, not just regular growing up stuff. Euphoric, elated mood, one moment, really down the next moment. It doesn't take long to go through withdrawal from opiates. So withdrawal looks like the flu. Nausea, vomiting, sweats, lack of sleep. So somebody who's been doing opiates, you might never recognize it. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've had people I know have opiate problems around me, and it takes me a few weeks to realize they're doing it again. But it doesn't take long for someone to consistently use opiates where they don't get them. There's going to be some signs that they're going through withdrawal. It's a big package of stuff. It's not just one little indicator. It's a lot of stuff. But I don't know, as a parent, I guess the best thing is trust your gut. If you get involved, you know your kids' hobbies, you know their likes and dislikes, and those things start drastically changing quickly, it's time to probably look a little deeper at what's going on with them.
Dino, I'd like to ask also if you could talk a little bit more about that. Once the parent notices that, what would be a route that the parent can take? Doctors? Start with the doctor?
So the best thing to do, especially nowadays, is like a preventive strike. The whole scare tactic stuff doesn't usually work. Never really did. Like educating your children when they're younger is really like the route to go. You have a conversation with them, like you'd have a conversation if you're treating your child about, intercourse or something. And it's an uncomfortable conversation, you don't want to have it, but educating is really good. But if you really suspect that your child is using, it all depends on what the relationship with your child is. First, you should confront it. You shouldn't be afraid to not confront it. If you really suspect it, you should ask them straight up what's going on. Maybe they might feel more comfortable talking to a professional, bring them to a therapist or somebody. Maybe they'll open up. It all really depends on what kind of relationship you have with your child, on what they're going to do. Because using is a form of denial. I mean, so many people are going to deny that they're using because they don't even really see it themselves. When you're an addict, you have to create a false sense of reality to be okay with what you're doing. And you absolutely believe this reality. So I'm, 15-year-old kid and I'm taking Percocets all the time. And my mom comes and says, I think you're using drugs and abusing drugs. I don't see it that way. I don't see it that way. My reality is telling me something different. My reality is saying that I'm just doing what everybody else is doing and it's no big deal, so that I can not as much lie to your face, I can pretty much tell you to your face, you're wrong, I don't have any kind of problem, and believe it. So it really is difficult. I mean, that's why, unfortunately, people don't usually get the kind of help that I offer until there's no more choice, no more chance of lying about it. There's no more covering it up. There's nothing left. You're forced absolutely to recognize and admit that you have a problem. People don't come to my treatment center the first time they ever picked up. It doesn't work that way. The first time their mom and dad said, hey, you know what, I think you're using, they don't end up my treatment center. My treatment center is for people who really, the consequences, the progression of their using, the progression of the pain to the family, the friends, themselves, is so great that it breaks through that false reality they built up. So it's difficult. It really is a difficult thing. So my best advice is form a great relationship with your child when they're younger. Try to have an open, honest, relationship with them. Educate them ahead of time. Don't use scare tactics. Just tell them the truth how it is, which the truth alone is scary. And just watch out. And when you do suspect, try to still be there, encouraging them and helping them, and don't come down as, domineering and authoritarian. Come down as somebody who cares for them and wants the best for them.
Okay. Anybody else want to address this? Rebecca?
Just isolation and paranoia, and look for them in your children. I mean, if they're stuck in their room all the time, they're doing something. And, if they're paranoid, if they're looking at the window because they think the police are going to show up, or they're paranoid because of the drug they're using, that is a big thing. When you're high, you're paranoid. You know you're high, and you're just not sure who else knows. So you're constantly looking over your shoulder. So if you see your children acting that way, or like I said, your adults too, there is no discrimination when it comes to addiction. So.
In our community, what are some of the protocols that are in place, for parents when they suspect, you confront the child, but then where else and what else can you do? Going to the minister, going to the doctor, where does the parent begin to go with this when the parent, even seeing an adult child or even a spouse seeing another spouse, where does the spouse go for help in our community?
Oftentimes, it's usually the law enforcement that gets them the help. I mean, most of the people that have come, the help, like I have seen many parents, I've seen, like when I was doing individual therapy, and now I've seen many people who know their loved one is using, and it's not usually until the loved one gets himself in some kind of intervention with law enforcement that it happens. I wish there was like some place you could just call and be like, hey, you know what, I know my loved one's using, and then we could come and take them and get them help. But unless they're willing to do it, the only way that they get usually hooked up without their will is through law enforcement, unfortunately. I don't know if you know anything better
I know the complexity of finding a bed these days for inpatient, depending on where you are, could be extremely difficult. So I know that families do, and I actually have someone in our family that wanted to go into inpatient and had to go all the way to Orlando, to Florida, to get it because there wasn't any beds available or there was a waiting list for it. And I'm sure you can interject, waiting for a bed can be an eternity.
I done it once. This is my first time, and I happened to luck out. Good family and friends. But yeah, that's where it's at today. You're waiting for a bed. And what do you do while you're waiting? You want to go back out. So.
Can someone pass this to Karen? Pass that to Karen? Okay.
So in our community, we created Woke Crossroads. And Woke Crossroads was developed to address this issue exactly. Where does someone go in their own community when a crisis occurs? Sometimes the crisis occurs in the school, and so you would hope that a guidance department in a school might be equipped to be able to assess a situation and provide a referral, but that doesn't always happen. Where are all the school personnel here tonight? Raise your hands. How many? 2, 3, 4.
5.
That's good. That's better than the average. I do this a lot myself also. I have to say that's better than the average. Congratulations. So the parent support group that we developed allows a parent who is scared, who is frightened, who has questions, who has probably tried a number of various things within their household, with their children, with counselors, with therapists, with the school, and are still at a loss for what to do. Gee, that sounds like my family at the time, because that's exactly where we were. And so one of the things that we realize in our community is there needs to be a place where families can go, where individuals can go, where they're not going to be judged. It's a really lonely place to be a parent with a child who's struggling with an addiction, whether the child realizes that that's their issue or not. So in this parent support group, families are there for one another. Another thing that we do at Woke at Crossroads is we provide interventions for families, and we help them set up their treatment. And we also get donations from our community, and we'll pay to send someone to a program. It is really hard. It is a problem to find a bed in Connecticut. However, Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, with some grant funding, has created a new website, which is far superior to the calling 211 or the 1-800 number that has been out. And it is ConnecticutAddictionServices.com. And what this website is real-time availability for every DEMIS-funded treatment program at every level in the state of Connecticut. And you'll go on this website and you'll see who has what available. So for instance, if I look for Rushford Center and I see that they have 3 beds available, I know that there's some place I can start right there. The website is divided with their programs depending on what type of program you're looking for. So it is a lot easier. It's a better option for people who are struggling, the family of the addict, the support person of the addict themselves. We've heard stories of people who go to try to get into a program and will sit on a wooden bench for 12 hours just hoping that space is going to become available. So this eliminates that. You're at least calling the numbers where you know that there's space available. So there's over 1,000 beds. I know that might be hard to believe when you're looking for a place, and it's really hard to find a place, and we're at that point often. However, that is also an indication of the great need in Connecticut and in other places. And so we do send a lot of people out of state because we can get them there faster. We'll pay for airfare to put someone on a plane and get them to Florida or California, because we know that if we don't do that soon, that window of opportunity for them closes very quickly and death happens really fast.
I think probably one of the most important protocols is to recognize that this does happen, and this does happen here in Burlington. We've heard that it happens in other communities, and we've heard the devastation that it wreaks, but make no mistake, this does happen in Burlington. Unfortunately, I don't get to see it. I do get to see it when it's too late, and as much as I like helping my community, I really do not want to have to go out on these types of overdose calls. They're not at all pleasant. Just as the officer and the trooper had mentioned, these awful things do happen here in Burlington, so please recognize that that's something we need to do something about.
I just wanted to speak on that, the bed availability real quick a little bit. It's a lot more fluid than it looks on paper. Like for myself, at the Carnes Week Center, if you were a male and you were doing a screening today, I think the wait list looks like something around 3 weeks. But that doesn't always happen in 3 weeks. Things change a lot. People leave, people don't finish treatment, people who are ahead on the list, don't come in. So if you have somebody who's trying to get into somewhere, you look at the website. That is a great website. We change it daily. Actually, by shift, we update the website. Don't just always go by the websites. Take the time to find a place, do a screening, and you'd be surprised how fast they'll call you back sometimes. I think too many people give up on that, and what happens is there's lots of times where I have what looks like a 3-week wait list, and I'm calling down people after people after people, and I can't fill a bed. So although on paper it does sometimes look really bleak, it's not always as bleak as it seems, because a lot of people don't follow through. But I do understand that there are times also where you just can't do it.
Lauren?
I was just going to reiterate the DEMIS website and how it's updated every shift and can give you a really good snapshot of what's available out there to kind of make this process a lot easier. It's been really great, and again, with just our use of technology, it's very helpful for people who are trying to get a quick answer and to give them a little bit of hope.
Right, and just to let you know, DEMAS is the Department of Mental Health Addiction Services. If you need to write that down, and the website's great. Okay, let me ask about some other things that we can do in this community. We mentioned lock boxes, and I know that here in Burlington, we don't really have a lock box. How often? What's that? A drop box? Is that the drop box? That's locked. It's a locked drop box, right. Can you say something about that? Maybe the...
We have one in South Windsor. We have a medication drop-off at our police department.
Right.
And we also do medication collection dates with some of our volunteer organizations where they'll wait outside and you can drive up in your car and just hand them and they are able to safely dispose of it. So that's a great thing if you're going through your medicine cabinet and you see a whole bunch of expired stuff. You can certainly dump it. That's exactly what we have at our...
Yeah, and I understand we can go to Litchfield at any time to do that?
They should have one at the troop. I'm not sure about the resident trooper's office in town here.
We're going to try to have one tonight, but we couldn't finesse it.
Yeah, they should have one at the troop. I know we tell everybody all the time, your prescription bottles,
okay.
take all the pills out, dump them in a plastic baggie, and get rid of the prescription bottles separate. Even though everything's confidential, this way here, you know what, your name doesn't appear anywhere anyways. And I know when I'm working, I tell everybody that comes in here, let's just dump your pills in an envelope and we'll throw them in there. So this way here, it keeps everybody's, nobody's looking at names anyways. I can tell you that when we empty the thing, we take it and we bring it right to the incinerator. So, but they should have one at the barracks in Litchfield.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to talk about just the Burlington experience with drop boxes. So in Burlington, we have the Resident State Trooper program. We have a dedicated Resident State Trooper. And at the town hall, that's their offices along with our local police officers. So we do not have a drop box at this time that's every day, 24/7. But there are times during the year that the Resident State Trooper will organize that through Troop L. And they'll have, that'll be promoted in the community. We've been doing it for a number of years now, maybe several years, and it's very successful. The residents that happen to hear about it and participate, it's overwhelming. I've been there, I've watched the officers, there's a protocol. It's very respectful, and it's very encouraging that folks participate. So we can definitely look at something to do it more periodically, but the state Troop L helps us with that. There are dedicated drop boxes in other communities. I don't, off the top of my head, I know the troop does it in Litchfield, Torrington, Simsbury. I see Lori raising her hand, yeah. Canton? Okay, so Lori indicates that Canton also has one. Canton, Connecticut, yeah. So, thank you.
There is also a website online that lists every community that has a drop box that is accessible 24/7. And there's a significant number of communities who have them. You're very close to Woolpit. You can come into our police department at any time, 24/7, and they'll allow you to drop your medications that you're no longer using, which makes your home much safer.
Okay. Just one more quick question, I think, and then we can take a bit of a break and collect your questions and then answer those. Looking at the reference to the stigma of abuse, how do we counteract that? I know that, we have communities where we're driven, we push our kids to college, we're always wanting them to be perfect. We have bumper stickers that say what perfect kids we have, and which is none of it, which is really true, we know that. But this is what we think is important, and yet when it comes to really helping kids, again, under the age of, 50 is a kid to me these days, what can we do to take away some of that abuse and that stigma of drug abuse and really help each other. We talk about loving one another, and that's really important, but this is a culture that we're trying to change. Any idea? You know, volunteering different places will help. I don't know. Karen?
Early intervention. We need to start talking about this with your children before your children are exposed to drugs. I think the general consensus, you know, one of the panelists here said, not in my family. I was one of those mothers who said, not my kid. I want to read you a little bit about who my son was, because, we'll get that later, that's okay. Because my son, thank you, is an average kid exposed to drugs. And so this description of my son should sound really familiar to you. It should sound like your son, should sound like your brother, your sister, should sound like your neighbor, it should sound like your grandkids, it should sound like the kids of people that you work with. It should sound like your next door neighbors. My beautiful firstborn son, Raymond, was smart, cheerful, funny, artistic, kind, and loving. He was delightful and a curious child growing up. He always had a smile on his face. He enjoyed playing with his younger brother, Andrew, and spent a lot of time with his grandparents. He loved drawing, and he loved all things creative. Ray was a very talented soccer player. He also played basketball, lacrosse, he skied, he rollerbladed, and skateboarded. He played the trumpet in elementary school and middle school. In high school, he learned to play guitar. Ray was a big fan of all kinds of music, and he had some really interesting dance moves. Ray relished time spent with his friends and his family. He was an avid outdoorsman and concerned about preserving the environment. He experienced nature through hiking, rock climbing, canoeing, and sailing. He was a member of outdoor leadership in high school and part of a boat building team. There he was able to learn new skills and flourish. As a young adult, he spent many weekends with friends hiking area trails. He was fortunate to have had the love of a beautiful girlfriend who later became his fiancée and planned to spend the rest of his life with him. Ray grew up with some challenges: learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder. Learning came, but with much struggle. He expressed that he was very different from others, even when he was in a specialized school environment, which focused on his strengths as opposed to his weaknesses. Like many of his peers, he experimented with alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana in his teens. Unlike many of his peers, he became addicted to substances. "Mom, don't worry," he'd say. "I know what I'm doing. I have control." He thought he had control over his drinking and drug use, but of course he didn't, and it only got worse. Ray did the outpatient counseling route, but never embraced that he was really in any kind of trouble with substances. Even when using substances started to cause big problems for him. When we were unable to get him into an adolescent treatment program, we ended up sending him out of state. He was 73 days in an outdoor wilderness therapy program. And from there, he went to a 12-month transition program for young adults in New Mexico. Upon returning home, he had some successes. He also had some relapses. He had some struggles, and then he had more successes. This is a hard road. Many people who make it to recovery relapse often. They're in treatment often. They struggle often. They burn bridges. The behaviors are very challenging. You look at your child and you don't know who your child is anymore. The behaviors that you see are caused by the addiction. This is not who your child really is. I say that to you because the face of addiction is everyone around us today. When you go into the lobby later, there's a poster there. It's called the Never Forgotten poster. And I would like for you to walk close up to it and look at the faces of the young people who have died from a substance-related cause. Their names are there, their birthday is there, and their date of death is there. Look at that. That poster is a mere drop in the bucket for the number of children that are dying across this nation, but it will give you a good idea of who the face of addiction is today. Also in the lobby, there's information that you can gather up. Take more than one, hand it to your relatives, hand it to your neighbors, leave it in town hall. Education is so important. We all need to be educated. And we need to be educated before the problem occurs in our household. I can't stress enough that reading to your child, having dinner with your child, being involved with your children's activities is not going to prevent addiction. That is the reality. That is the truth. These substances are everywhere. They're in the high school cafeteria. Kids are blowing lines of Coke in their textbooks.
Okay. On that note, I'd like you to please write your questions down, and members of the Burlington Community Fund will come around and collect them. And I urge you to take a quick break as we put our questions together here. And please also look at the quilt that we have out there. Karen brought that, commemorating some of those people who didn't make it. Okay, we have quite a few questions here, and I hope some of them will be able to answer. The first one is there a reason we can't have a drop box in town that's advertised and frequently available? And the answer is yes, there is a reason. From what I have been told, drop boxes that are there 24/7 have to be manned, as it were. Correct? Is that the right terminology? There needs to be somebody there at all times, so that whenever anybody comes in to use the drop box, it can be opened and locked, and then that's what they do. We do not have people 24/7. Yeah, go ahead.
You're learning more about our Burlington Police Department than you thought you'd ever know tonight, so thank you. So the other locations that we talked about tonight, all the other towns and the troop, one thing that, because we're in the Resident State Trooper program, we have an office there. So there's some critical elements of a police department we just don't have at this point. We don't have a dispatcher. So there's not somebody there 24/7. And that is a requirement of having a drop box. So it could be something we could evolve in, and that's why we run this program a couple of times a year and encourage folks to go to the other communities. When our officers are on duty, including the resident state trooper, they're there in the office. They could be there for a good part of their shift, but most times they're called out. They have medical calls, they have to respond, they're out on duty, they're out on patrol. So therefore, but the drop box needs to be manned and locked. And there's protocols associated with that, so.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Can I give statistics of the number of overdoses and deaths in Burlington or drug busts? I don't have those statistics. John?
We don't keep close record of that, but we do have approximately 5 overdoses each year that we have recorded on EMS runs, and that's been recorded over about the past 10 years.
I actually went online and looked. No, don't quote me because it was just a quick one, but you can go to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. The website actually has the list of overdoses by towns, and they do contain where the overdose occurred and where the person actually resided. And I've got 2 from 2015, ages were 30 and 69. One in 2016 was a 28-year-old, that was fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine. And one 23-year-old in 2017, that was fentanyl and Xanax. Again, don't quote me, I didn't spend, you got to go through a list of 1,000 names, but when I did a quick Burlington search, those individuals were either in Burlington at the time of their death, or they were listed as a Burlington resident and maybe have passed away in Bristol or somewhere else.
This isn't meant to be alarmist, but in my 16 years in Burlington, I've done at least a dozen funerals of teenagers that have died from suicides and drug overdoses. So it's very real and sobering. And each time I say, I hope you're the last one, and it's not the last one. So anyway, that's my experience. Yeah.
The most important statistic that any of us need to know is the number 1. My son was one individual. Our family was one family. And saving one life matters.
I had 8 deaths in 6 months with overdose. That'll tell you where it's at. Being part of the community, it's a tight community. People that want recovery, it's a tight community, but they relapse. And with what's out there today, you know, it's a one-shot deal. So I went to 8 funerals in 6 months.
On a different topic, what about treatment options for older adults, senior citizens who are abusing opioids prescribed by a physician? How is treatment different for older adults? How do you tell if it's dementia, abuse, or opioids? How do you work with an enabling spouse or significant other? Anybody want to try that?
I mean, if you're talking about dementia to that extent, you need medical interventions as well. The facility I have isn't a medically monitored facility, but there's no age limit. Well, it's adults, so it's 18 and above. I have had older individuals there, 60s plus, with opiate addictions or alcohol addictions. And I mean, you're treating them the same. You're treating them as an individual. The only, I guess, problematic thing would be if there was underlying cognitive issues that would come into play. And then that you would need a medical intervention. Enabling, if I could give you a good answer on that one, I could write a book and make a lot of money. Enabling is like addiction. The person's only willing to stop when they're willing to stop. So you can sit there and you can, I mean, I'll tell you, I used to sit there and do family sessions with people, and in my mind I'd be saying to myself, God, why can't they just see what they're doing? They need to let go. They're killing this person. You know what I mean? They're enabling them to death. And it seems so apparent to myself until I personally went through a situation where I had a loved one who, you know, was using opiates, and I did the exact same thing that I used to tell everybody else not to do. So it's a really hard thing. The best thing to do is to be there to support the person, so you have somebody who's close to you, you see that they're involved with a loved one that is, you know, using, and you can kind of see that they're really not helping the person, they're enabling them, because it is a real thing. The bottom line with addiction, as long as someone has someone to co-sign their stuff, as long as someone has somebody to support them, usually mom, usually a dad, a grandma or something, that back to that perspective I was talking about earlier, if mom lets me stay at her house and gives me money, then I'm okay. You know what I mean? It makes that narrative say that they're okay. And lots of times, people only really get help when all doors are shut on them and there's nothing left. There's a big difference between loving somebody and detaching and supporting them with love and helping them continue to use. It's really difficult, and it's really, really difficult when you tell a parent that they're doing that when all they see is that they're saving their child or their husband or their wife. So, yeah.
I would suggest too, Codependents Anonymous meetings are great for people that are codependent. Al-Anon meetings, these are great programs out there for people that have a loved one that's addicted. Our compassion wants to enable them, but it's sometimes it's our problem as much as theirs. So please avail yourself of those groups if they're great, I think. So.
I work in a rest home, and I can say that 50% of the residents are opioid addicted, and they don't have families, and I don't see any programs out there helping them. The only thing I can think of is if we volunteer to go in and spend time, maybe, they have an AA program that goes on there that nobody attends. It's when you're older, I guess, and with no family, there's not much to look forward to. So maybe if we'll go in and spend a little time with these, folks, play a game of cards with them, do something, and then maybe introduce a program to them or have the rest home get involved. But it is sad how many people are opiate addicted. The meds that they take every day is incredible. But I don't know of any programs that are available for older folk.
And along with that is the question, what are the ways to become politically proactive to make treatment more of a priority, and how do you get government to pay attention? I think the problem there is money. Karen?
Our voices really do make a difference. There are many people who are in recovery, and there are families of loss who spend a significant amount of their time speaking with their state reps and their state senators. They spend time at the Legislative Office Building in Hartford, testifying at hearings. It seems very challenging. It is very challenging to change what should be obvious, because working in the legislature is very difficult. But they do hear our voices, and sometimes it takes a long time highlighting what needs to be changed and working with the people who have the power to do that. And so don't ever feel that your voice isn't heard. If you have something that you need to say, you really need to be talking with your state reps and your senators. There are specialized committees in Hartford for people who are working on these particular challenges. The State Drug and Alcohol Policy Council has people that come from all over the state working on 3 different subcommittees to make changes. It takes a long time to make those changes, but when they are made, they are helpful.
Burlington State Senator is Beth Bai, and our House of Representative is John Piscopo, if you don't know that already.
I know from my experience doing these panels and dealing with the politicians that participate in them, we did talk earlier about how they changed the simple possession from a felony to a misdemeanor. That was one of the things that the legislation worked on trying to do to get people to seek treatment as opposed to incarceration. I know there is some work, and I'm not 100% familiar with it, but they're working on their prescription monitoring system to hold doctors a little bit more accountable for the prescriptions, as well as monitoring actually where these prescriptions are coming from and how much are being prescribed to patients. So I see in long term, they try to work with actually holding the physician a little bit more accountable for over-prescribing and abuse.
Okay, thank you. Does Northwest Connecticut include Waterbury and Torrington? Not Waterbury, but yes, Torrington. And what percentage is rural and what percentage is from the cities? I'm not sure what that means. What percentage of users? And Sarah, is Sarah here? Sarah, can you answer that at all? When we look at Northwest Connecticut, Northwest, looking at that area, and we look at addictions and the like there? It, yeah, I think that's what the question is.
I'm not sure. It's definitely not limited to one area. You see them in all kinds of demographic situations, especially in rural areas. We see more opioids than some other substances. What's difficult about it is that somebody who's struggling with addiction doesn't always have a place. We spoke about the medical examiner statistics for the fatalities of overdoses. It may have been a Burlington resident, but at the time they were in Burlington, so it's difficult to narrow that down. But I don't have specific percentages off the top of my head, but it's definitely in all types of communities. You might not hear about it as much in rural communities. And another major point is that there are a lot of overdoses that aren't reported. A lot of people have non-fatal overdoses, and ambulance isn't called. Somebody saves them as so although we have 5 or so overdoses when the ambulance was called in the last year, we don't know how many other overdoses have occurred in town that aren't reported.
Okay, thank you. Also on the card, it says, each of us as parents, members of the community, can maintain and model attitudes and behaviors on how to live. The condition of my community and my world is my responsibility. And I think we're hearing a lot of that lately. Yes, indeed. What can be done for those who have been prescribed for pain and are now addicted? The pain is now doubled because of the original and now addiction. How do we help these individuals? Where do we go? Back to the doctors? Back to find a bed?
I mean, if the individual has been prescribed, now they're actively addictive, they'd have to go through a detox process, but there is medication-assisted treatment that can be used, such as Suboxone, for pain. Neurontin is another medication that's prescribed for pain. It's a really hard thing because you get somebody who has built a really high tolerance to something that was medically handed out to them. And it's really hard for that individual to admit they have an issue or a problem because, the doctor gave it to me. But I think doctors nowadays are a little less freely with the prescribing, and I think, unfortunately, they get to a point where they prescribe and they just stop prescribing. And so then the individual, is stuck with an addiction. I know McCall House, they have lots of different modalities there, lots of different ways that they can help you between inpatient, short-term, long-term. We have a women's program there. We have the outpatient. We do medication-assisted treatment. And like I said, the Suboxone can be used for pain management. And then there's pain management clinics. Nothing's ideal, but trying to do something is better than just doing nothing and hoping it gets better.
There's been a large initiative to decrease narcotic prescriptions in the state and federal initiatives. Has this decreased recreational use, or have you seen a decrease in abuse? Or is it too early?
There's no decrease in abuse.
No decrease.
It's every year there's more people who are dying. Every year. There's no decrease. It just keeps going up and up.
Now, if you suspect drug use, what's the first step in approaching a family member? Should you ask directly? Wouldn't they lie? How do you prevent an argument? I don't think you're going to prevent an argument. You're not going to, so you have to realize that's not going to happen and be ready for it. Other comments?
I mean, if you suspect a family member, the best thing to do is to logically write down every reason why you suspect them. Don't run on emotion. Like I said, try to research what the signs are, what the tells are. Look for yourself. And when you confront them, you can't worry about hurting their feelings. You know what I mean? Eventually, enough people. Addiction is secrets. Addiction is people, hushing, not saying, not talking. That's what it's all about. It's about silence. So you can't worry about offending them. I mean, if you have someone that you love and you can educate yourself about the signs and the telltales, eventually you know. And you just need to confront them. And it's really good to give them options, to let them have, you know what I mean, to have, don't just come and say, this is what you're doing, and then that's it. Like I said, once again, McCall, I'll just put that out there, 860-496-2100 is the main office. There's lots of options. Arm yourself with options. Like the good old interventions work best, and only when you give the person you care about, you lay out very, very concretely what you see, what you observe, how it's affected you. You give them an option of getting help, and then you have the opportunity for them to have help right there. And if they're not willing to take it, that's where the enabling needs to be cut off. So it's kind of like, you're going to get help, I'm going to support you, this is where you get help, I'll help you do that, or, you know, I can't have you, you know, keep supporting you, or however it is.
And don't have your exceptions too high. The first time you approach them, you're definitely going to be defensive and not want to hear what's being said. So don't expect the first time of approaching that results are going to come. You know, once you approach an addict and tell them you're aware of their addiction, they do think about it. They may say that person's full of it, you know, what are they talking about? I'm not an addict, but the seed has been planted. So, you know that that's happened and approach them again.
If there are other family members or friends who are also concerned, it's best to meet together with them and approach the individual with a plan. It's a lot harder to deny something when you have 6 people sitting in front of you expressing their concerns than it is for you to be one-on-one with someone.
Okay, thank you. What age do you start educating your children?
Immediately.
Depends on, yeah, exactly. I'm thinking even at home, are you somebody who pops pills all the time for a headache, a sprained finger, or whatever? What are you modeling? Question. Towns that have clinics, is there an increase or a decrease? I'm not sure what that means. An increase or a decrease in people coming in, or not sure, but here's a question. Does meth lead to more or different addiction?
Meth?
Meth.
Oh, meth is a big killer.
So methadone?
Well, it just says meth.
Methamphetamine or methadone?
Well, let's answer both of those questions.
Well, methadone is a medication-assisted treatment, along with Suboxone and Vivitrol. The person who asked that question might want to give us a little bit more direction.
I was going to say with methadone, it doesn't lead to any further addiction. It helps to curb all of the physical withdrawals of the opiate addiction while the person is working on the mental aspect of their addiction. It allows them to be more engaged in counseling because they feel stable, they don't feel sick. And as was mentioned in the presentation earlier, over time they may taper off if they continue increased stability while on the methadone. I also do know that with the Hartford Dispensary Torrington methadone clinic, there has been an increase over the last year in the amount of patients that are currently enrolled there. Not significant, but enough to say that this problem is increasing, especially with the recent spike in fentanyl that's in the community.
Medication-assisted treatment helps an individual to put their life back together. If medication is helping curb cravings for the drug of your choice, I don't know, you might look at it like someone who needs insulin, someone who needs eyeglasses. I have a thyroid condition, I need to take a thyroid supplement. If it helps you to curb your addiction, then you're better able to seek education, to seek employment, to get a driver's license, to work on your relationships with your family and your friends. It gives you an opportunity to move forward in a lot of different areas that if you're still struggling and using, you're not able to do those things. In addition to medication-assisted treatment, counseling and therapy and support groups are also important. There's no one thing, that's going to help a person to be abstinent and be in recovery. There's a lot of different things. It's hard work. It's a lot of hard work.
Okay, how about starting with a visit to the doctor? That way, no accusations or assumptions. What are your thoughts on that?
Who's starting with?
Thinking, when you think that somebody might have an addiction problem, start with a visit to the doctor.
So, if you have a minor and it's your child, you could do that, right? But if it's an adult, there's HIPAA confidentiality that you can't go to the doctor and they're not going to intervene in that manner. Peer supports are really good. Going to the doctor for advice, I guess, he could give you advice on the person. But if it's a child, if it's a minor, yeah, you could bring your child to the doctor and get advice from the doctor. But as an adult, there's nothing you can really do on that level with that. Interventions are awesome. Yeah.
Okay, where do you go to get interventions?
Wilkie Crossroads.
There you go, Wicked Crossroads.
Sounds good.
Free of charge, all volunteer.
Many towns in Connecticut are joining a lawsuit against Big Pharma, who produce and push opioids to medical professionals. Thoughts and opinions on this?
It's about time.
Did you hear that?
No, I didn't.
A little food for thought, but the people who actually make these opioid pain medications are also the same people that make naloxone.
Yeah.
So we're getting
Really?
both sides.
Right.
And I know that there is, from some of the other programs that I've participated in, I know it's something that there's groups of people that are looking to do. Whether or not it gets enough ahead of steam to do it is a different story, but I know I've heard it mentioned before at other panels from panelists that it's something that they are looking to try to do. There's a lot of money there.
They have very deep pockets.
Absolutely. It seems that there are many youth in town that are dying in the years after high school. And what programs can be put in place for this population? Disconnect between services while in school to nothing after. So I guess it's looking at the support system that they have in the schools is no longer there when they go on to college or just after graduation. So do you see that, let's see how I'm going to phrase this. Do you see kids in their 20s who have this problem? Do you see that these problems started in high school? Are they problems that start later? Are they maybe peer pressure emotionally started later? Do we have any ideas on that? Sarah?
I think that a lot of times we see that age range is suffering from the overdoses because somebody who has a heroin or opiate addiction, it didn't start there. They started with alcohol and marijuana. And so something that we talk a lot about when we talk to our students is that we're not going to stand there and tell you that if you smoke marijuana, you're going to become a heroin addict. But every heroin addict we talk to started with alcohol and marijuana. So what's happening is that in the middle school and high school ages, these same individuals are still, they're experimenting and they're putting substances in their body that maybe we don't consider as bad as opiates or steroids, but then they can progress to that stage of use in their early 20s. So I think that the problem starts at that very young age when we start to experiment with other substances, and then it just the progression where in the early 20s till we kind of get to that point where we use the opiates.
Psychologists have long pointed out that the 20s, my father told me once, son, if you can get out of your 20s, you got a shot. So there's a lot of alienation and struggles with adulthood and all sorts of issues, and those years are tough, really tough. And what's been pointed out, I've found in this town too, a lot of people that have trouble are in that college age from, say, 19 to their early 20s, when they're struggling to find a career, to get their act together as adults. It's just tough. So yeah, I think it's always been that way, but so I don't know.
Brain development is
Yeah.
there as well, because the brains in boys especially are not really developed until about age 25. So they're still not dealing with a full deck, as it were.
The use of any substance leaves you vulnerable to try another substance. And so with our young people, our adolescents and our teenagers and our young adults, if you're using a substance such as marijuana or cocaine, you're getting it from somewhere. The dealer has other things. You leave yourself open to being presented other drugs. The dealer's job is to make some money. And so there's big argument today, especially about marijuana. Connecticut is looking at, should we legalize marijuana? Other states have legalized marijuana. If science tells us that a young person's brain isn't fully developed until they're around 25 or older, it's probably not a good idea. And there's argument on the other side also that if marijuana is legalized, there'll be other things that aren't added to it to make it more safe. I don't think those dealers who are lacing marijuana with other substances are going to go away, even though there's a shop to sell marijuana in our community.
Just to piggyback on that, they are mixing fentanyl with pretty much most of the hard drugs out there now. So we're seeing it in crack, we're seeing it in cocaine. They're pressing fentanyl pills to look like alprazolam or Xanax, as well as Oxycontin, as a way they could transport it around. We're also seeing some small traces and stuff of fentanyl and marijuana as well now. So you have to really be cautious if you do find this stuff in your home and you're not sure what it is. Give your local police department a call to come out there, but be very cautious on how you touch it. This stuff gets on your skin, some of it's transdermal, gets into your bloodstream, you're going to find yourself having a pretty difficult time. So if you're not sure what it is, definitely give us a call. We'll come out and get it out of your house for you.
As far as the question is, when is it like really taking off? Is it the 20s or younger? I don't have all the statistics or anything, but from the eye test, just from being around and what I see and what I witness, it seems to me that as time goes by, it just becomes more and more culturally accepted to do opiates. So as when, I was in high school, it was you smoke a little weed maybe, and you drink beer, and that's culturally accepted. Everybody was like, yeah, they're okay if they do that. It just seems as time goes by, they're getting younger, and it's hard for someone who's never been in that culture to understand it's just okay. It's just okay when you're 15 years old to pop opiates. And from what I've been witnessing and from what I've been seeing and from people I've been talking to who come to the treatment centers and such, they're not even starting with pills anymore. They're just starting with heroin. Like, that's just what it is. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but it seems to me that the beginning date of opiate use is getting smaller, as far as how old they are, and what they're using seems to get a lot more like straight to the heroin. So you can bypass the whole, I took pills for a few years, then I couldn't get them, then I, got sick, so I had to get heroin. I've heard more and more stories of people who are 18 years old, 19 years old, who said, I've been using since I was 16, I started off with heroin. First thing I ever did, so.
And what message would you give to those that say that Narcan administration should be a 3 strikes and you're done? First responders should not respond to repeat offenders.
Could you repeat that? Could you repeat that?
Sure. What message would you give?
My response would be, would you be saying that comment if it was your child on the 3rd, 4th time?
Yep. What message would you give to those that say Narcan administration should be a 3 strikes and you're done? That is, first responders should not respond to repeat offenders.
My response would be addiction is a disease process. And if you had cancer and you had 3 rounds of radiation, should we be done with you? Narcanning someone and bringing them out of a life-threatening overdose, allows them the opportunity to try to do something to change things around for themselves. Education and awareness is what we need. We all need to be better educated, and we all need to talk to people so that others can be aware. Pick up those pamphlets on the tables in the lobby.
I don't think as a society that any of us really would accept that, because just like in cancer treatment, if it doesn't work the first time or the second time, somebody wouldn't say, don't try it the third time. Maybe a more appropriate response would be that, hey, after that second time, maybe there's a law in place that says mandatory treatment now for you, and that's where we're going to send you, I think would be a more appropriate response. Because for me, you see it out there. As police officers, we see a lot of this, where you see somebody that's been Narcan 3 and 4 times. And just imagine your 19-year-old child who's been to the hospital 3 times for overdoses and has been Narcaned and brought back, and you don't even know it. How do you help somebody? So these same laws sometimes that we put in place to protect us, they do have consequences in a negative fashion. In the HIPAA law, that is a negative fashion sometimes that, listen, if it was my child, I'd want to be there for them to help them, Let's not fool ourselves at all. Please don't, anybody in this room. Drug use, drug abuse, and drug misuse is a very, very complicated topic here. And I'll take my law enforcement hat off for a minute, and I'm going to put on my hat where I've talked to a lot of people that have been in really bad situations with addiction. And addiction is very complicated in and of itself. And most of the time when you're going to find people that have addictions, there's also an underlying problem with them, that they're self-medicating an issue there. And I don't, we really haven't even touched on that, because that's even a more complex problem that we could talk about for hours and hours and hours. So we talked about when you get that first opportunity to have that intervention, to talk to that family member, your child, and say, listen, we think there's a problem, and it's tough to find a bed. Listen, I hear it all the time from people that the beds really, they're tough to get. But be prepared. Talk to them and find out what's that other issue that may be going on there. And listen, I'll be honest with you, there are some people out there that they're just chasing the high, and there isn't going to be that other underlying issue. But probably, and again, I'm not a counselor or an expert in this field, probably 95% of the people that have problems with drug abuse, there's an underlying issue that they're self-medicating for. And that's probably the most important thing, I think, to really is identify that at the same time you're helping them with their drug addiction, use, abuse issue that's going on in their lives. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. I mean, we've seen people, we talked about enabling people before. I've seen mothers driving their daughters and sons around to, Willow Street in Waterbury to help them buy heroin because they can't bear to see their child that sick. They're throwing up, uncontrollably throwing up, and the only thing that's going to make them better is that next bag of heroin. And, their parents feel for them, and people do a lot of things to help enable them. And I'm not sitting here telling you that's the right thing to do, because there's a lot of bad things that go along with that also. Supporting your kid and talking to them, your family member, is the best thing that you could do.
When somebody has a smoke alarm or a fire alarm that goes off repeatedly, the fire department always turns out for that. Just as if somebody continues to overdose and needs Narcan administration, we'll always turn out for that. They're human beings, they've made mistakes, they need chance after chance after chance, and as long as we can continue doing that, there's hope that they'll change.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't really need it.
No. I don't see who could actually say, no, you're not going to get the 4th one. I mean, who among us is to judge? Who has the right to say that? It's a disease. I'm just floored by the question. 3 strikes and you're out, because you are out, obviously, if you're not getting it again. I'm just floored by it.
There was a sheriff out in Ohio that made some comments publicly that he wasn't going to allow his deputies to go out for overdoses. So that could be where that question came from. Yeah. But I know it was a pretty hot topic a while back about it.
And the last question says, can you have this panel present at an assembly to the high school students or even middle school? This panel is is convened for this evening, but Sarah Osborne, Dino, and Alico, I think you're part of this too. They are involved with Region 10, and they do presentations for the students. If you would like your child to see this presentation, thanks to Nutmeg TV, who has been here this evening, thank you very much, we will have a recording of this available to you, and you can tell other people about it. It'll be on the town website as soon as we get it going, and the Burlington Community Fund will be involved in putting it online as well. There are many different ways that you'll be able to see it, so we will do it that way. I want to thank you all for coming this evening. I want to thank my panel for sharing so much of what they do, because what they do is incredibly special. I want to thank, again, our people who brought brochures, who are sitting in the audience, our wonderful front row here, and Phyllis, and certainly and all the wizards behind the scenes that made this evening possible. This is the end of our discussion, but we will be here and we'll talk to anybody. I want to thank you again for coming. Thank you.